Sunday night suspense, Chicago crumbles, and a powder keg for the Powder Blues. All that and more because it is time for Sunday Night Blitz. All right, by now you guys know the deal. He's Frank Schwab, Yahoo Sports NFL and betting guru. I'm Jason Fitz, and it's time for Sunday Night Blitz, the show where we go through every single game from Sunday. But let's start with just a general observation here, Frank. I don't know if you thought the same thing. As I was watching games today, I kept thinking, look, I'm not sure, as we say every week, I'm not sure how many of these teams are good, but I'm sure of this. Like this weekend, we had really good games. There was just a lot of this is entertaining football to me. I'm not sure this team doesn't suck, but I don't care because I'm at least engaged for these 3 hours.
Man, I mean, this is probably the best week of the NFL season so far. Just as far as the quality of games, we had some upsets, we had some great performances, a great Sunday night game to finish it. It was in the season that I've been critical, so the games weren't quite that great, a lot of bad quarterback play, et cetera, et cetera. This day delivered. Do we have a lot to talk about tonight.
Well, let's start with Sunday Night Football because as we tape this right now, it has just come to an end. And it's sort of the chef's kiss. It's the perfect dessert at the end of a great meal of Sunday action because we got a game between Minnesota and Denver that had this level of intensity. They mentioned it several times on the broadcast, Frank, but both of these teams had so much to play for, and you could feel that as Denver gets the late improbable win. The Vikings up late. I thought that was going to be it. Russ drives him down the field. There was no answer coming finally from the Pastronaut. The Vikings take a loss. The Broncos get a win, and this feels like one of those shaping moments for the rest of the season for both teams.
Look, the Broncos somehow, some way are in the playoff race. And that's kind of the beauty and somewhat the weirdness of this NFL season is there was nothing, absolutely positively nothing to indicate the Broncos were going to be any good this season. After 4 or 5 games, they looked like maybe the worst team in football. And there was no these signs. No, they were just terrible. And now they've just lifted themselves back to 5-5. Great win for them. I mean, it's crazy to say that about a Vikings team that we both thought was dead too. It's kind of similar teams, but it was a great win. The Vikings have played really good football. I thought they played very well tonight. I thought Brian Flores' defense was excellent until that last drive. But I think the story out of this, based in Colorado, obviously, and a lot of Broncos fans are trying to be super optimistic about Russell Wilson, right? Look at his numbers compared to Mahomes. And, that was kind of ridiculous. You're like, yeah, Russ is playing pretty well. He's doing well. I thought that this kind of completed his so-called comeback. We wrote him off. I was even questioning him last year. Everybody, to the point of is this guy going to be a NFL starter next year? Is he going to get benched? Jared Stidham by October? I had said that was a possibility. A lot of people thought Russell Wilson was washed up. He was just terrible last year. So there were reasons for it. He's completely done a 180. He's having a good season. And today, when they needed it most, he had a vintage Russell Wilson drive, capped off that great catch by Cortland Sutton in the end zone. Hats off to Russell Wilson, man. You can talk about Sean Payton turning him around and all this, but it's Russ who blocked all the noise out. He probably had to have self-doubts. Well, why wouldn't he? But he just kind of persevered, and he's back as in this league where we've had terrible quarterback play all season. Russ is probably a top 10 guy again, right? And it's crazy. It's a great story. I thought he kind of completed the circle tonight, and it completed this great comeback from the abyss last year.
Okay, so first and foremost, I was wrong about Russ. I was one that said he was cooked. I think what's really important here, and part of my logic, I like to show the math sometimes on my logic. Part of my logic was, given the ego that it took to walk away from Seattle, why was he going to lose that? Now, today was a pretty good example when you mentioned the comeback of a couple of times on the broadcast, they alluded to the fact that both of the teams feel a little bit like Seattle. Well, they do. Russ isn't cooking. I know 27 of 35, 259, but it's a pretty efficient version of Russ right now. They're not asking Russ to go out and be a world beater. They're asking Russ to go out and just do his job, which is very different from what we saw last year. So I think this moment for him, this ascension that you're very right about, is a big part of why they're back into this. It's they've got the skill position players. We all know that. There's no question about that. It just feels like they've tempered everything back a little bit to just managing expectations a little bit. They manage their offense really well. That puts them in this situation, because you saw Russ and Josh Dobbs, and I felt like in some ways you were seeing a little bit of the Spider-Man meme. Like there's a lot that both of these players do that's really good, and sometimes it can get a little bit scary. So I do think you're right that there's some credit here to give Denver, obviously in a big win, and Russ in a big win. I think a big key to that is that Russ is being asked to do what Russ does that we all know that is good. It took a little bit of lack of ego, walk it back a little bit to take that role in my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, if last season didn't humble him, nothing was, right? Like, he was terrible. I mean, there's no doubt. But now you look and it probably wasn't Nathaniel Hackett's fault, right? Like, I mean, look at the Jets this year. Let's be real. And I don't think Russ is ever going to be back to the point he was with Seattle when he was legitimately top 5, 6, whatever you want to put him at. He was in that tier of hop on my back, I'll carry you. I don't think he's ever going to be that guy again. But he's safely in that second tier of, hey, we can win games with this guy. He's perfectly reasonably competent. And I thought he was really just kind of Russ on that last drive. No, it wasn't any spectacular plays, any 50-yard bombs to Jerry Jeudy or Cortland Sutton, but just managing the game. Very calm, just confident. I think his teammates had confidence in him too. That certainly couldn't have been there last year. So again, hats off to everything with the Denver Broncos right now, right? Russell Wilson, who had every reason to self-doubt himself. The team who was one of the worst in football has completely turned that around. The defense looked like one of the worst of all time through the first month of the season. It played fairly well tonight. Like everything about the Broncos is just very impressive in the way they've turned around their season.
I agree, and this is a big loss for Minnesota that snaps their 5-game winning streak. They also lose a little ground in their division. We'll get to that in a second. Minnesota still has all the playoff opportunities in front of them. Justin Jefferson still expected to be back soon. Thought he might be back tonight. That wasn't the case. I think it'll be interesting to see what that does for their offense. But part of the reason they lost ground is because of one of the games that I thought was just going to be awful. I thought that the Bears versus the Lions was going to be an absolute bloodbath and disgusting. And early on in the game, it was just a bloodbath in favor of Chicago. Like the Bears were out there the whole game. And in fact, you can look historically with time of possession and +3 on the turnover margin. The record of teams that have that leading into tonight was 48-0. It's now 48-1 because the Bears found a way to lose that sort of a game to the Lions, who were having an off day, like Jared Goff throwing the ball to the wrong person all the time. But somehow, some way, the Lions managed to get an improbable comeback 31-26 win. I was stunned. Like, I was stunned the way the game was going, but also then stunned that Detroit found a way to pull it out.
Yeah. Nobody likes hearing about your fantasy team or your bad beats, but Fitz, you're going to have to listen to this one because I'm in a survival pool. We're down to 3, right? I took the Jaguars. Beautiful. Brilliant, right? One of the guys in there, shout out to Noah, who runs a pool, took the Commanders. I'm good. Third guy took the Lions. Jason, I had it. I spent in the checks. I was buying myself some J's. I'm writing winners and losers, thinking about, I get those black and red 11s. I felt good. I felt great. How did the Bears blow this? What is happening? I will say this, though, and we've said this a lot about this Lions team because it's hard to get away from this narrative about this is a different Lions team, that they're shedding all of these years of losing. Which Lions team in the past could have overcome that game by Jared Goff? He was terrible. He was for the first 3 quarters. First 3.5 quarters, really. 3 interceptions. They were all bad. They're down 9 points with 3 minutes to go. There is really not a Lions team of the past ever that was going to come back from that. But this Lions team is different. Dan Campbell, a lot of credit to him for instilling this culture of we're not the same old Lions. We're going to go out there and get this win. And they did, and all credit to them. Now, they got some help. Justin Fields misses a huge third down pass that would have sealed the game. I don't like taking that shot there, but they had it, and they just missed it. But overall, I think the story of this game is, the Lions struggled. They did not play well. This was not their A game. But they get a win, and that tells me something about the Detroit Lions because so many Detroit Lions teams of the past would have folded shop and not even come close to that comeback. Great comeback win for them. Number 1 seed still in play for them. And more than that, it's just another brick, right, Fitz? We know we can win. We can win. We don't need to play our A game to win. Look at we played our C- D+ game and we won. I think that's huge for this Lions team. Even though they didn't look good, the final outcome's really good for them.
Well, and I think on the other, I agree with everything you just said about the Lions, who sometimes you just got to find ways to, like, oversimplification. Good teams find a way to lose or find a way to win. Bad teams find a way to lose. And we saw that in this game. The Lions have been the bad team more often than not. So a lot of credit for them being able to figure out a way to pull that game out. But this also creates a complicated portion of what has to happen in the analysis for Chicago. I don't think any of us believe that if the Bears have the first pick in the draft, which right now because of Carolina they would, that they would pass on a quarterback. But Justin Fields played well enough. Like today you saw those moments where you're like, oh man, I see it. Like I don't think, I think it's pretty fair to say that Fields' future is not going to be in Chicago because you're going to have the chance to reset at the quarterback market. But Fields looks like he has a future in the NFL. It's just, this is what's frustrating is that you find a way to lose that sort of game. And if you're the Bears, you're sitting there saying, this is almost worth, like it'd be easier if Fields went out and sucked because then at least you could say that's not the guy. But he went out and played well enough that you look at it and say, no, those are the traits we look for in the guy.
We'll get to Carolina in a second, but I'm pretty sure they're Bears getting the first pick. Let's put it that way. Like that Panthers team is drawing so dead. It's unbelievable. So you're right. The good news for Chicago is Justin Fields is helping his trade value because at the end of the day, I just don't think they pass on Caleb or Drake May. Whoever they prefer. A lot of guys prefer Drake May. I prefer Caleb, whatever. I don't think you could pass on that because, again, you restart the rookie contract thing. You can get something for Fields. Maybe you look at that pick and you say, look what we just got for the Bryce Young pick. We could double that for Caleb Williams. And you kind of restart your franchise that way with your rebuild. But yeah, you're right. Like there are times Justin Fields, you're like, man, he does have something. He's not finished product yet, but there are signs that he could be a really, really good quarterback. And that it's going to be a tough call for them. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think they move on from Justin, but he can make it really difficult for him these last few weeks. But this is, again, like when you talk about Chicago, I think you said it best. Bad teams find a way to lose, and unbelievable they lost this game. It really was. Like they played so well in this game. And for 56, 57 minutes, we're clearly the best team. How do you lose? You put out that stat, the 48 previous times in NFL history, and this is the first time a team in that situation lost. Like, just incredible. This Bears team, they're going to have a really, really come to Jesus offseason. Is this our right head coach? Is this our right GM? Is this our right quarterback? Like, everything needs to be evaluated. But the good news for them is they have the kind of draft capital to turn this thing around really, really fast.
The Lions are 8-2 for the first time since 1962. And this morning, I was making my breakfast, and I had an old episode of Family Guy on. It was a Thanksgiving Family Guy, and it was where, Peter and Brian had broken into a zoo because they were trying to steal a turkey so that they could make up for the fact that they didn't have one on Thanksgiving. And they're confronted by the lions in the lion den. And Brian looks over and says, hey, aren't you supposed to be losing a football game today to the Lions? And all I kept thinking is, man, how that narrative has changed. You went from being the butt of a joke on Family Guy to being the reason that we're going to watch on Thursday. The Packers are not the draw. The Lions are. I'm just saying. All right, another huge game today. That I had interest in just to see what it'll look like because, obviously quarterback injury is a big part of the conversation. But the last time we talked, I said it pretty clearly. I don't think Cleveland's season was over, and I still think the Steelers suck. So I had all eyes on this Browns-Steelers matchup. And look, I'm not going to say it was pretty, but the Browns get a win, and the Browns remain right in the thick of this entire thing. Like they are a front runner for a wild card spot right now. Kenny Pickett did not look good. DTR looked good enough to win the football game. The Browns win the way they're going to win the rest of the year. Great defense, able to run the ball, and you just keep this thing ugly, and you hope you get it done. Kudos to them for the 13-10 win.
Yeah, I think they just become the Jets where every week's going to be a slog, and they're going to pull out some wins because that defense is so good, and Kevin Stefanski's having a heck of a year and all that. But this is ugly offense. I would circle back to the Browns because what I took out of this game was, man, the Pittsburgh Steelers have to be like, what do we do with Kenny Pickett? He was terrible in this game. Like, I get the Browns are a great defense. I get that. But watching that offense was like, what on earth are they doing? Like, they had no chance in that game. Like, Kenny Pickett got outplayed by DTR, a fifth-round rookie who looked really, really terrible at his first start against the Ravens. I just don't know what they do. Like, it's just, maybe it's all Matt Canada's fault, like all of Russell Wilson's problems, or Nathaniel Hackett's fault. I don't know that. But the Pittsburgh Steelers need to make some changes. Look, they're 6-4, and Najee Harris after the game basically just I'm sick of this. I'm sick, and he, a lot of expletives. He's obviously frustrated. Didn't point fingers, didn't name names. But it's pretty easy to figure out what he's talking about. Like when you have a passing game that's this bad, your offensive coordinator. That has to be a question, whether he keeps his job. I know Steelers fans have been calling for his head for a long, long time. But the bigger question is quarterback, because he drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round to be a lot better than this. And he's not there. I thought he would make progress, but he hasn't. Where are you at with the Steelers? I know 6-4. We all know the stat now that they've been outgained in 10 straight games. So they're a lucky 6-4. I love Mike Tomlin. I think he's a Hall of Fame coach. And I think they win a lot of games because of that and because he's really, really good at managing this stuff. But I don't know, man. This could be a team where we look up and we're like, whoa, the Steelers have lost 7 in a row. Like, you could see that kind of drop for them.
That's I mean, when you ask where I am with them, I wouldn't take him against the Bengals. The way the Cardinals played today, I don't think I'd take him against the Cardinals. I would take him against the Patriots. I won't take him against the Colts. They'll get the Bengals again. Won't take him there. They'll get the Seahawks again, or they'll get the Seahawks. Won't take him there. They'll get the Ravens. Won't take him there. Like, I think the wheels are going to fall off. And this isn't about Tom. Like, the only reason most people don't think that is because of Mike Tomlin. Well, that's fine, but at some point you can only make so much chicken salad out of so much chicken, you know what, right? Like, and that's just what's happening every week. Like, the one thing that we have seen repeatedly, if you want to be a great NFL team, one thing you have to be willing to do is admit your mistakes. And if there's any fatal flaw right now to the Steelers, it's that they haven't admitted their mistake with their offensive coordinator. And I think they haven't admitted their mistake with their quarterback. The best thing they could do to help their franchise moving forward is get rid of both of them and press restart at the position and with your offensive coordinator. And if Mike Tomlin and the organization chooses not to do that, I think that's a warning flag at some point. Pride is the downfall of man. You can't let your relationship with your offensive coordinator be the reason that you send your whole team down the tubes.
It's really a problem right now. And I think I'm less likely to give up on Pickett already, just because he's a young guy and he does have the pedigree and he has shown flashes. I mean, those fourth quarter drives are really good, and maybe a better offensive scheme really helps him out, and he thrives in year 3. It's just hard to reset a quarterback. Like, who are they going to get? Like, okay, great, you dumped Kenny Pickett. You've already won 6 games. It's not like you're going to be drafting in the top 5. So it's really hard to find a next quarterback. So I'd give Kenny Pickett at least another year. Maybe he pulls a Tua. 3rd year's great. I don't know. I wouldn't bet on that right now, but it's at least possible. Now, with the Browns, to circle back to them, do you think they have any shot to win this division? I just can't see them overtaking the Ravens, but man, that's a tough team to play. Like, every game when you're going against the Browns, you got to be like, this is going to be a really, really long Sunday for us.
Well, and I think the hard part for the Ravens is that the Ravens lost their most important offensive weapon, not named Lamar Alexander. Like, so the loss of Andrews is wildly significant for them. So, but at the end of the day, like, if I got to trust one quarterback versus another, like, there is only one quarterback I can really trust in that division right now, right? Like, I'm not going to trust Browning. I'm not going to trust DTR. I'm not going to trust Kenny Pickett, as I just established. So that leaves me one. Like, Lamar's the only quarterback I trust. Yeah. So I trust the Ravens to win the division. But I think right now, today, as we stand, it's not unfair to say that the Browns can make the playoffs. There's no doubt in my mind. Well, do I think they'll win a playoff game? Probably not. But is that defense and their running attack good enough to keep games manageable to get them there? Yeah, I think so. So I still think they're a playoff team. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm on the fence. I'm going to say no. I'll just say no, because I just think it's going to be, that offense was hard to watch today. Steelers were worse on offense. That's all. Like, I just don't think this Cleveland team can move they're bringing in Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco ain't helping you, man. There's a reason Joe Flacco was unsigned on November 19th. Okay. Like, Joe had a great career, but it ain't there anymore. I don't think he really helps anything if he even gets a job at any point. I mean, maybe DTR keeps it. It's so hard in the NFL, and that AFC is deep. There's a lot of playoff contenders. I look at, the Bills are a wild card contender. The Broncos moving up into there. Do I trust the Browns situation overall more than the Bengals or the Broncos situation more overall than I trust the Browns? Probably, just because the offense is going to be so bad, but that defense is good. I think what's going to happen is, one way or another, the Browns are going to get to the end of their season, whatever it ends, whether it's week 18, wildcard round, whatever it is, and they're going to say, man, what if Deshaun stayed healthy? Like, not that we've both ripped Deshaun Watson a lot, but we both know he gives them so much of a better chance to win than what they have right now. And it stinks for Browns fans, like, front office, whatever, you made your bed. But for their fans who have suffered so much, it really stinks that their season's going to have this unfulfilled potential.
Which leads me straight to the next huge outcome we had today in some ways, because Look, I genuinely feel bad at this point for Jets fans, right? I mean, the Jets get their asses kicked by Buffalo 32-6, and I don't think there's a lot that's shocking about that, right? I think the demise of the Bills has been overreported. So I don't think the Buffalo Bills coming out and beating the snot out of the Jets is not, wildly shocking to me. But at some point, you have to look at Zach Wilson and say, hey, let's just admit that we have a problem. And this is my weekly reminder that, Gardner Minshew was signed in March for a reasonable contract. Could have been a Jet. My weekly reminder that Josh Jacobs has been traded twice. Could have been a Jet, right?
For nothing both times, basically. A late round pick swap, whatever.
I mean, that's the surprising part. And I've seen, several conversations about, well, what if the trade deadline was later in the season? Would somebody like Jimmy G have been traded, instances like that? And I understand that, but that doesn't change the reality that the Jets had to plan for. They had to know that there was a chance they would need their backup quarterback, and they had to know that Zach Wilson couldn't be that guy this year. They had to go into the season with 3 quarterbacks. They did not. And now, as a result, they basically kick their fans in the no-no places every single Sunday by making them watch that quarterback play. He's just not qualified to be an NFL quarterback. And as a result, the Jets get their butts kicked every week, and it gets more and more frustrating for their fans.
Yeah, I saw a stat that their receivers today had 9 yards. 9. And you got one of the best receivers on the planet, Garrett Wilson. You don't just have slappies at receiver. You actually have some decent receivers, and they had 9 yards today. At one point, the Bills led 16-zip, and the Jets had 18 yards of offense. It's just unwatchable. It's just not NFL football. And finally, I thought it was very, very telling. Obviously, not breaking any new ground here, but when Robert Saleh finally benched Zach Wilson today, because Robert Saleh has been the guy at every press conference, and I get it. He's kind of got to do this. He's got every press conference saying it's not all Zach Wilson's fault. You guys are being lazy, just blaming Wilson. It's this, it's that. Zach Wilson's playing pretty well, blah, blah, blah. For him to actually finally get to the point of, I can't watch this anymore, Tim Boyle, I don't even know if you could do anything, Tim, but we got to try something else. I can't watch this anymore. And I think the Jets are in that place of, we just got to try something else because this ain't working. What if we got to lose? We had the worst offense in the league. So for him to finally take that step, and then after the game, not give Zach Wilson the vote of confidence, he could have done to Bill Belichick like he's done to Mac Jones a few times in the past, and say, well, you know what, we're getting blown out, just wanted to get him out of there. He's still my guy, but he didn't. And I think that means you're going to see a new quarterback for the Jets in the next game. Just because, again, at some point, what do you got to lose?
Yeah, why not?
This just ain't working. You're 4-6, your season's slipping away, and you're in danger of losing the locker room. Those guys might like Zach as a person. I don't really know one way or another, but at some point, the guys in the locker room know he can't play, and you're not even trying anybody else. You're just blanket statement every Monday, this guy's pretty good. No, he's not. Everybody knows the locker room's smarter than that.
And think about who they're taking on next. I mean, they're going to have a Black Friday matchup against Miami, right? So it's the only game on in that window, which means yet again, the entire nation is going to be paying attention to it. And you got to think that as a front office, as a coach, as an organization, you just get tired of being embarrassed on national TV with your quarterback situation. I think that plays into part of this conversation when your team owner comes in and says, what the hell are we doing? Right? Why are we putting this on display for the world? When you're in the New York media market where all of a sudden, I even heard Boomer make reference to it today. Guys in the studio say, man, going to be a long day on New York sports talk radio. There is just this trickle-down effect to the entire organization of what we're seeing right now that you can't escape. So you got to make a change because at least it's something different. You just can't keep running it back.
Yeah, if you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over and losing the same way over and over, you lose your team after a while. Your culture gets really bad in a hurry. Real quick on the Bills, you sound pretty optimistic about them. I've been down on them. I kind of figured they'd have a good game today. You shake things up with the offense coordinator like they did firing Ken Dorsey. Everybody takes notice. You kind of have that game where, okay, we're in line now. We're going to play really well. But you think is this who the Bills are the rest of the season? I think they're 10 games in. 11. They are actually 11 games in. What's the record the rest of 6 games? Can they go 5-1, 6-0 the rest of the way? I don't know. I get the arguments if you say yes, but it's hard to trust them.
It is hard to trust them, but they lose a close game to the Broncos that, had they had the right number of men on the field, wouldn't have been the same. They lost to the Bengals before that in a close game. They lost to the Patriots in an inexcusable loss, but also a close game. They lose to the Jags, who've turned out to be a pretty good team, in a close game. Like, I think, look, they've got a gauntlet coming. They've got the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Cowboys. Like, those next 3 games are going to be difficult. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them lose one of those, but I don't think that there's realistically, you look forward the rest of the season, I still think that they've got wins ahead of them. The Eagles would be tough. It's at Philly. The Chiefs would be tough at Kansas City. I think they can beat the Cowboys. They can beat the Chargers. They can beat the Patriots. So it all comes down to that Dolphins game. Like, I still think that they have a very real shot at being a 10-win team. And, this feels a little bit like San Francisco when everybody wanted the wheels to be falling off the 49ers because they looked like garbage for a few weeks. But then all it takes is one thing to click. There's still so much talent on this team. It only takes one thing to click. I am a little worried. More defenders fell down in this game. More guys injured in this game. So I'm a little worried about the defensive depth, but I think they're still going to be okay.
That's fine. I'm interested to see because I've been riding that fence with the Bills where thought they'd be good. I understand all the arguments, the analytics, all this kind of stuff. Just the eye test. The Bills, when the Bills hit their top gear, like the 49ers who you just brought up, they look like a Super Bowl team, right? Like they just look like a very good team. They don't look like a great team today. They look different than they have in the past few weeks. I think that maybe just shaking things up. Ken Dorsey probably didn't deserve to get fired. Whatever, but you had to do something drastic because your season was kind of slipping away from you. It was a drastic move, and they look like a different team today.
All right, let's break down everything from Sunday. And speaking of coaches getting fired, I want to say loudly, I never root for anybody to lose their job because when somebody loses their job, there's a trickle-down effect to everybody. It impacts their family. It impacts, their kids. It impacts all of the assistant coaches on the staff, that, the equipment managers, the training people. Like, all of these people can have their livelihood in jeopardy when a coach gets fired. So I don't ask this lightly, but how can you watch the Chargers at this point and justify Brandon Staley still being on the sideline next week? Like, if anyone hasn't seen it, his meltdown after the game when he was asked if he's going to give up defensive play calling only speaks to the amount of pressure he's under. But let's be real. The Chargers defensively are a disaster, and they only suffer more injuries. It just feels like they can't put anything together. Yeah, dumb drops. Like, everything the Chargers do wrong every year came into this one game, and they blow it against the Packers.
No, yeah, listening to Staley, like, you don't got to ask this question anymore. I'm going to be calling the plays. Well, Brandon, you have one of the worst defenses in football. Jordan Love just torched you for like 322 yards. And you lose that game.
I mean, by far his best game with the Packers.
Yeah, I thought he was really good in this game. But part of that's the Chargers defense stinks. Like, and you're the defensive guy. You're the one calling the plays. You're the one refusing to give up play calling. And you're right. This roster is way too good to have this record, to lose game. Like, if you're a good team, you beat the Packers. I'm sorry, Packers, but you're not very good either. So it has just been a horribly disappointing year for the Chargers. It goes kind of back to last season. Week 18, Brandon Staley plays his starters for absolutely no reason and gets Mike Williams hurt. The next game, they blow a 27-point lead to the Jaguars. That kind of bleeds into this season. I'm not saying there's a carryover, but yet it's just this. There's nothing good about the Chargers right now. And like you said, if firing guys at midseason, I hear this a lot. We'll talk about this with Washington too, because they're in this conversation of some guys like, why it serves no good to fire somebody during the season. Ask your Raiders about that. Ask last year's Panthers about that. If I'm San Diego, I'm sorry, I just did it right. I'm Los Angeles.
That's a fine. Yep, that's a $5 fine.
Yeah, I'll pay the tax. If I'm the Chargers right now, I'm like, what does it hurt? Like, our season's going absolutely nowhere. We're one of the most disappointing teams in the league. We need to do something like the Bills. Very drastic. Brandon Staley's got to go, and we'll just see what happens. Maybe we get a spark. Maybe we don't, but it's certainly not going anywhere right now.
Look at their wins this year. Okay, they got a win early on against the Vikings. That's a good win at this point. The Vikings started slow. We all know that. That they got a win against the Raiders, who ended up firing their coach. A win against the Bears, who were terrible, and a win against the Jets, who we just covered.
Oh my goodness,
blow
those
everything
are their
up.
wins, huh? Yeah,
those are their wins.
Wow.
So when you start to put that together, their losses, the Dolphins, the Titans, the Cowboys, the Chiefs, the Lions, the Packers, they've lost every good team they played.
Yeah. And even some bad teams in there. There are a couple teams in there where I'm like, you can't lose that team. Can't lose to the Packers. Can't lose to the Titans, And they still have games against the Ravens coming. They got the Broncos, who we just talked about, are better than we expected. They have the Chiefs coming, the Bills coming. Like, they have 4 or 5 more losses on their schedule, even if all they do is just keep going with the norm here. I don't understand if in this year's AFC, and usually I'm with everybody when I say, hey, what's the point of firing anybody? In this year's AFC,
there are so many teams that have a chance to make the playoffs. Every week that you leave somebody on the sidelines that's a liability is a disservice to your franchise. Like, it's just, you have to be better at some point when it comes to, hey, this is a weird year. We still got a chance. We got to blow this thing up right now. I mean, obviously, it's not Brandon Staley's fault that Quentin Johnston just flat out
goodness,
drops.
He's had such a bad rookie season. First round pick, when Josh Palmer, Mike Williams go down, they need him to step up. It's like, you're a first round pick. Let's go. That drop he had today was so bad. I mean, they're going overtime if he catches that. At very least, and probably win the game.
Yeah, and so it's not Staley's fault that these things happen. It's just the entire culture's broken for the Chargers. You got to fix it. And I don't know how they do it. That's not the only one. You mentioned Washington. Let's go to the Washington game, because Washington came into today's game against the Giants pretty heavy favorite in the minds of most because of how bad things have gone for the Giants. And instead, man, Tommy, don't call me Danny DeVito, went off in this game. Absolutely just torches the Washington defense. The final score in this one, 31-19. And I feel like I've said this to you before, but like sometimes we're watching, I was like, I can't believe it's that close. Like, the Giants dominated this football game to me.
Interested to hear your reaction to my take that I wrote to lead off winners and losers. I think Washington has to fire Ron Rivera right now and give Eric Bieniemy the rest of the season because of this. It's like I compared it to a rookie quarterback, right? When you were saying, like, we got to give Will Levis the rest of the season. So we know by the offseason, hey, this is our guy, this is not our guy, whatever. We've all been talking about Eric Bieniemy as a really, really good candidate for a head coaching job. He obviously couldn't break down the door, whatever. You hired that guy for a reason. I think he's done a good job with Sam Howell. Not today. The Washington turned it over 6 times today. They were kind of a disaster on offense. But overall, Sam Howell came into this week leading the NFL in passing yards, and he was making progress every week. I think Bieniemy's done a good job with that offense. I think he's ready for a head coaching job. And I think the Washington just owes itself to be like, we know Ron Rivera's done after the year. I like Ron Rivera. I do. I think he's a good leader. I think he's very professional. I think he added a voice of an adult when all the Daniel Snyder stuff was happening. He's been actually pretty good for the Washington based on the fact that everything around him was collapsing. But clearly he's not going to be back next year. Fire him now. Give Bieniemy the last 7 games. See what you got. Like, maybe at the end of the year, you're like, yeah, he's really not head coaching material. We're going to go get somebody else. But at least, like in my comparison with the rookie quarterback, at least going into the offseason, this guy's our guy, this guy's not our guy.
I would love to see Bieniemy have been more balanced this year as an offensive play caller. This is another example of Sam Howell throwing the ball 45 times. They got behind. I think that is part of it. But I'm not sure that Bieniemy has been the lights-out offensive coordinator I want him to be sometimes in this situation. But you are right about everything. Like, I'd never thought of it in the stance of, like, let's just see what we've got. That makes a ton of sense. Like, most teams don't have a coach in waiting. Bieniemy is that. Like, we all knew coming into this season that if things went well, Bieniemy was going to end up somewhere else because, frankly, he got out of the shadow of Andy Reid. So, things have gone well enough as an offense. But I like your point to bring him in. I just also would add one other thing to it. This is the second straight week I've looked at the defense, and I thought, man, I wonder how different this game would look right now if, I don't know, you had Chase Young.
Chase
right?
Young, like, to sweat.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking at this thing. The Washington Commanders made a conscious decision to get rid of 2 players that would have helped them in games like this. So I think the organization's already told you what they're in for the next year. But if you're looking to lose, then go ahead. And in the meantime, for the Giants, like, good for you. Like, it's been a long time since we've seen the Giants play with that level of give a damn. Like, I felt like the Giants came out and charged in this one. And, we've asked some tough questions about what the future for Daboll looks like. This was one of those games where I was like, okay, they're not done. They're still at least fighting, so I'll give them credit for that.
100%. I thought getting games like this, I know there's probably Giants fans out there who are like, man, I wish we had lost that. Draft position, it's an important draft. But Daboll couldn't just let the rest of the season go, right? Like, and I questioned him just straight out, like, why are you starting Tommy DeVito again? This is just, what are you doing? Like, he had 44 passing yards before their last drive against the Cowboys last week. Like, he did not look like an NFL quarterback at all. And you're like, what are the Giants? Are they even trying? Well, stuck it to me today because he looked pretty good. Like, hats off to Tommy DeVito. I don't know where his career is going, but he'll always have today, where he looked like a pretty darn good NFL quarterback. He led them to a win. Like you said, Giants completely outplayed them. Like, it was never really a game. So hats off to him. Hats off to Brian Daboll for keeping this locker room together enough to go on the road, get a win. Against a good team, but whatever. Doesn't even matter at this point. I thought that was huge. I really do. I think it was huge for the Giants to not just roll over for the last 2 months of the season, but to actually show some fight, like you said.
I can't say the same thing about Carolina because I feel like they've rolled over. They're playing dead. Maybe they are dead. Dallas rolls them 33-10. That's not a big surprise. It's there's no nice way to say this. It's the absolute incompetence of what they're trying to do that really stands out to me. Like, Frank Reich comes out and says, well, we just got to get better. Okay, how? What's your plan? Because, like, what I saw was just a big old barrel of suck coming from Carolina. Remember, as we referenced earlier, the first pick in the draft right now would belong to the Bears because they traded that first pick to get Bryce Young. And so right now, they look dead in the water. I don't understand the vision at all for the franchise. They got their asses kicked, and Dallas went out and did what Dallas needs to do, which is, by the way, just a credit to the Cowboys. Sometimes you just got to go out and win the easy ones. They did.
Yeah. No, beating bad teams is a sign of a good team. Like, I've said that a lot about the Dolphins. Like, you can't, you don't want to squeak by the Carolina Panthers of the world, and they didn't. They took care of business. Frank Reich's for the wrong owner to have this kind of season. Like, David Tepper loves firing dudes, and I can't imagine he's too happy with what he sees. I mean, when you fire a coordinator or demote a coordinator, as Reich basically did this week, taking over play calling duties, that's kind of the last step, right? Like, there's nobody else to point the finger at. It's on you. And this offense was probably worse today than it has been. I think they set some season lows in some categories, maybe yardage, whatever. They look bad again with Reich calling the plays. He obviously didn't help the situation that much. I think Reich's coaching for his job the rest of the way. If this team ends up 2-15, 1-16, like, I can't imagine David Tepper of all people is going to be like, yeah, just run it back next year. We're good. Like, you're right. Nothing looks good with them. They do look like easily the worst team of football. I can't imagine they don't get the first pick. I mean, at least the Arizona Cardinals are fighting, right? Like, I mean, the team's down there. The Giants won today. Like, the Bears have been playing a lot better. All these teams who are down there are at least showing some forms of life, where the Panthers just every single week it gets worse. Man, I like Frank Reich. I always stuck up for him. I thought he was a good coach, but this is just turning out to be a disaster.
You mentioned the yardage, 187 total yards. And in just one of the weirdest, this just shows you how strange this offense is. Bryce Young finishes 16-29 for 123 yards. Like, that's just such a wildly low number for that many attempts and that many completions. They got nothing going in this. And they also, of course, had a couple of turnovers. They only had 13 first downs in the game overall, and that includes garbage time. So it just...
And 13 seems high watching this game. If you would have asked me how many first downs the Panthers have today, I'd have been like, 6? I mean, it was awful. Like, it was bad NFL football.
There was a moment where a buddy of mine was texting me, and he asked about the games going on. And I was like, yeah, keeping an eye on the Cowboys game for fantasy. And he said, he texted me back, and he's like, well, they play at 4, right? Eastern time. And I was like, no, they're playing right now. And he said, well, I'm on Red Zone and haven't seen a single highlight. I'm like, what do you think this game's going to be, son? Like, that's just the way that game went. And it speaks to the fact that it was just, it was a mauling. Now, I expected, for the record, a mauling in Miami. I don't know, I thought the Dolphins would win by 30 over my beloved Raiders. Instead, I watched a plucky Raiders defense play much better than I thought they would in a 20-13 loss where the Raiders offense was absolutely abysmal. Give the Dolphins defense a lot of credit. Aiden O'Connell looked like I kind of thought Aiden O'Connell might look this season, looked a little confused, held the ball forever. But here's what stood out to me, Frank, because I said going into the game that I thought the Raiders' defensive plan, as a huge fan for anyone that's listening and doesn't know, I thought that the Raiders understood they had to do one of two things, either shut down Mostert or try and shut down Tyreek Hill. And then I thought they'd look in the mirror and say, you know what, we can't shut down Tyreek. So we're going to let Tyreek go off, but we're not going to let anybody else beat us. And we're going to hope if we do that, we can win the football game. That seemed, I felt like the smartest guy in the room, because that was definitely their plan, was we're not going to let the run get away from us. We're not going to let anybody else get the best of us if we can avoid it. They forced a bunch of turnovers in this game. The Dolphins didn't play clean, and the Dolphins come away with the win that I think has me a little bit nervous about where the Dolphins are, because I don't think the Raiders are good enough to be in a 7-point game with Miami.
I'm going to flip the script on you. I give you a little bit of hope here, baby. I think the Raiders are just a different team. Like, they fired one of the worst head coaches of all time, and they've looked like a pretty good team. Like, if you were just to be in a vacuum of the last 3 games, this Raiders game today would have made sense. Like, yeah, they won a couple games, went on the road against a good Dolphins team. They had a bunch of chances in the fourth quarter, and Aiden O'Connell just couldn't get them over the hump. Well, you know what? That happens. Dolphins are a good team. No big deal. I thought that of all things, and I know this is a little counterintuitive, but I don't think you're necessarily going to disagree with me. I thought that this game brought Antonio Pierce closer to getting that full-time job. They went on the road, and they played hard, and they played well, and you didn't win. Okay, you're not like you said, nobody expect. Vegas couldn't, like I was reading this morning, Vegas couldn't take a bet on the Raiders plus 14 today. Nobody thought the Raiders were keeping us close. They did. They played hard. They played well. They just had a rookie quarterback on the road who couldn't get them over the hump. This team continues to play hard for Antonio Pierce. And I do think Mark Davis at the end of the day is not going to repeat his Rich Bisaccia mistake. I think he's going to give Antonio Pierce a full-time job if they continue to play like this. And honest to goodness, Fitz, I think they will. Like, I just think there's a different football team now that they have an adult at that position.
I did say when I've been asked what it would take for Pierce to keep the job, my comments have been pretty across the board on all the radio interviews I've done over the last couple of weeks. In my mind, he can't get blown out by Kansas City, and he had to play somebody tighter than expected along the way. Today accomplished tighter than expected, right? Like, I don't think Mark Davis is ever happy with the loss, and I think they're a little bit frustrated with some of the offensive woes, but I do think you're right that this game actually gets Antonio Pierce one step closer to being the full-time guy. And frankly, I don't know if that's good or bad. I just want, I want my team to look competitive, and they did.
I love the way the players have responded to him. Like, whether that's just some passive-aggressive Josh McDaniels hate, it probably is. But I think he's a great, he comes off as such a great leader, and that's what I want out of my head coach. Like, you can find coordinators to be great X's and O's guy. I want a CEO who's going to be in there, commands the room, gets his players to play hard. To me, through 3 games, we got a long way to go. We'll see. But through 3 games, Antonio Pierce has really impressed me that way, and I really do think he's going to be the full-time coach of the Raiders next year.
So he's been impressive. Mike Vrabel, for most of his career, has been impressive, but the wheels have fallen off for Tennessee. And you were right. I'm just going to say it loud. I'm glad we didn't place a large wager on it, because I would be buying you some sort of, onesie that says Fitz sucks on it, because we before the season, we disagreed on Tennessee, and I said the whole country is sleeping on them. And you said their offensive line is too garbage. There's no way. And man, today, they didn't even look competitive against the Jags. The Jags came out and reminded everybody that there's one team in the division that's good. There's one team in the division that belongs in the playoff conversation. It's Jacksonville. They get a 34-14 win that includes some garbage touchdown action for the Titans. And I'm sitting here looking at the Titans and Mike Vrabel and all of the hype that I was giving them, and I think some other people have given them along the way. You've even got Derrick Henry now speaking out. Like, I think this was a big statement win for Trevor Lawrence to go out and play really well, for the Jags to look really in control of this game. And also, they reminded everybody that this Titans offense doesn't scare a damn soul.
No, I mean, Will Levis came out with that awesome first game, 4 touchdowns. You're like, whoa. And he even looked solid against the Steelers, the second game on short week. It's just kind of fallen apart since then. I mean, his final numbers didn't look bad, but if you watch his game, the final score was not indicative of how much of a blowout this was, even though they ended up winning by 20. Like, it was even further than that. Like, Jacksonville's so much better. And Levis's final stats were nowhere near how bad he played. Like, they were just really bad in this game. Got really nothing going until garbage time. And, I mean, still, it's fine. Give Levis the rest of the season. Your season's done anyway. You got to see what you got with the guy. But, the Titans just keep taking steps back. The decision to not trade Derrick Henry, it's just wrong. Like, I mean, I love Derrick Henry, and it's awesome when a guy finishes his career with somebody and all that, but they probably needed to move him. They kind of overestimated where they were as a football team, I think. I think they thought, hey, we could still be in the playoff race, and you're just not there. I mean, it's a bad football team. But
real quick, think about this. If they thought they were a playoff team, then why the hell did they let A.J. Brown out of the building? And then when they didn't realize that they shouldn't have continued, like the number of bad transactions, like A.J. Brown leaving doesn't fit the business plan. Keeping, at that point, Derrick Henry or acquiring DeAndre Hopkins doesn't fit the business plan if you need to rebuild. Like, it just feels like they've been teetering on both sides of this thing so long. And it's like, you can't win that way. You have to have a clear vision of what you're doing.
you trade Kevin Byard, but you don't trade Derrick Henry. Like, what are we really doing? Like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I will say, real quick before we move on, I do want to say about the Jaguars, they needed a game like this. Their offense had been fine. Like, they're okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with the Jaguars offense, but Trevor Lawrence had like 9 touchdowns coming into this game. Calvin Ridley had games where he's just disappearing. I thought Ridley really showed up today, more than 100 yards. I had 2 touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence looked really, really good. I get the Titans aren't very good, but I think this was just a nice step for the Jaguars, who are pretty clearly going to win this division. And if they want to make any noise in the playoffs, it's going to have to be because Trevor Lawrence is playing out of his mind, and he needs to get to that point. And I thought today was a good step for that.
Next game up, speaking of playing out of your mind, how about the game of threes? That's what I'm going to call it. 333 yards, 3 touchdowns. That would be the stat line for one Brock Purdy, as the San Francisco 49ers went out and just they took Tampa Bay behind the woodshed and they said, "You, sir, do not belong on this field with us." It was a butt whooping, but it was like, we sit here all the time and talk about Brock, the game manager, and we talked about that losing streak, like Brock was just not good enough. This was one of those games where he didn't look like a game manager. He looked like he was capable of being an aggressive quarterback when he needed to be. And the 49ers look like they have fixed whatever they had a common cold. They're fine right now.
I mean, obviously I do power rankings every Monday night, post up Tuesday morning. And there's certain things I just can't do. Results have to matter at some point. But if it was like an honest power rankings of this is the team I think is the best team in football, the 49ers would be number 1. Like, they're the team where I watch them and I'm like, if Brock Purdy's playing like this, there ain't nobody beating him. It's not happening. Like, if Brock Purdy plays at this level, they're winning a Super Bowl, period. Like, he's the what. I hate that it's such a kind of a trite, dumb cliche of like, they're going to go as far as this player takes them. But with Purdy's case, it truly is. Like, when he's playing well, when he's making good decisions, when he's playing within himself in the offense, this team looks legitimately unbeatable. Like, and I think you'd agree. Like, I mean, if Purdy, I'm not saying perfect passer rating every game, but if Brock Purdy's playing like he has when he's good, when the 49ers win, I think you'd agree. They're best team of football, right?
And they're just like Oregon in college football right now. Like, if I was on the college football playoff committee, I would really struggle with what to do with Oregon. They have 1 loss, but I think if you're watching the games right now, they're playing better than most of the teams that are ahead of them. I would have a hard time keeping them out of the playoffs. This is the same exact thing. Like, you're right. The wins and losses have to matter. The funny thing is, everything went to you-know-what for those few weeks, and it became this, look at all the pressure that's on Brock, and maybe he's not the dude. The fact that he survived that era, remained consistent through that era, and now is thriving on the other side of it, that speaks to Shanahan. That speaks to all the things we talk about, the way the organization sort of insulates. Like, they're doing things better. And they, yet again, as they are every time, they were aggressive at the trade deadline, and they went out and they made themselves even better in areas that most people didn't think they needed to be better in. And what do you know? All of a sudden, it just feels like Tampa Bay had no answer for that defense throughout the course of the game, too. So San Francisco on both sides of the ball looks virtually unbeatable right now. Yeah,
they're really, really good. And I do want to say this about Brandon Ayuk, who Matt Harmon, our colleague, has been talking about for years. And he is so right. We spent so much time, and rightfully so, talking about C-Mac and talking about Kittle because he's so fun and such a fun, great player. And Debo's awesome, right? Brandon Ayuk really makes them go. I mean, he is so dominant. His good games are just blowtorches. You can't stop that guy. He was awesome today. A big reason Purdy put up that stat line. Again, another reason why. I mean, Ayuk is a guy who we talk about 4th among our skill position guys, and he might be a top 15 receiver, like in the NFL. Like, that's how good the 49ers are. And again, when they're playing their best ball, they are easily the best team of football. I don't even think it goes back to, look at the way they blew out the Jaguars. Look at the way they blew out the Cowboys. The Buccaneers aren't terrible, and they got dominated today. When the Pittsburgh Steelers, the 49ers blew them out. When the 49ers are right, they are so good, and they're a joy to watch.
So a couple of games left here to get through, and one, I think, really left me impressed and also like a little shooketh on both sides. And I can't believe we're talking about this game with this much gumption. Houston beats Arizona 21-16. There were 2 things that stood out to me in this. One, Kyler Murray. I've been sitting here saying there's no way they want Kyler Murray moving forward. They're going to go somewhere else. They want somebody else. He had some of those plays again today that you just look at and you're like, shoot, man, I don't know what you're supposed to, like, how are you supposed to stop that? Like Kyler Murray and, our very own guys have been telling us that, no, the Arizona wants this to work and they want Kyler to be the guy. Like as of right now, Arizona would have the second pick in the draft. And our insiders have said, no, they would rather trade that than draft a quarterback. You see Kyler do what he does. And it's like, maybe hell, I don't know what to make of that. Like I thought Kyler Murray was great at times today.
I can't believe how well he's moving. Like, if you would have just erased everything Men in Black style from last December, I would never have known he was ever hurt. Like he looks prime Kyler Murray, moving around in the pocket, making those plays you talked about. I've never been the biggest Kyler Murray fan, especially after that contract. I don't think he's played up to that contract, but he has games like the last couple where you're like, I can see it. I understand. I get it. Like if you're the Cardinals and you get the second pick, you want to trade it or you just want to draft Marvin Harrison because he's a once-in-a-lifetime guy. Okay, I can't say that's the craziest thing I've ever heard because, again, Kyler has this skill set that it just sometimes leaves you wanting more. It's almost kind of his curse a little bit where you're like, he's so good sometimes. You want to see that play in, play out. He doesn't always do that. But he's changed the entire tempo of the Cardinals. Like the entire tone of their season changed when he came back. That team plays at a just different speed right now than they were.
So the other side of this is I was watching CJ Stroud, and I was thinking early on, you know what? It's hit. A little of the rookie turnover wall as a quarterback is hit. He had 3 picks in this game. But he continued to do what we've talked about a couple of times on this show. Like, he throws the pick, he comes right back, takes him downfield, and then makes a throw to the back corner of the end zone that you're like, how in the hell did he throw that ball there?
Like, play. Oh, my goodness, that play. The receiver, too. Tank Dell ran a route, and you're like, oh, my God. And Stroud to hit him. CJ Stroud continues to impress. I get it. Like, his stat line was great, the 3 picks. But, again, he hasn't faced much adversity in his career. This was his worst game, I think. And he still threw for 300 some yards, and they won the game. Like, this is... CJ Stroud is, this is going to help his MVP case because everyone's going to say he threw 3 picks, whatever. But there's something to be said about CJ Stroud, like shrugging it off. Like you said, okay, all right, I threw a pick. Let's go. I'm gonna hit Tank Dell for this unbelievable touchdown and help us win the game.
Think about this. On Sunday, this weekend, the next game for Houston is at home against the Jags. Now, as of right now, Houston sits at 6-4, right? Like, they're 4-1 at home. And their next game is against the Jags, who they beat early in the season in Jacksonville, 37-17, right? So, this is, you want to talk about, I mean, earlier I just said
the Jags. Tiebreaker,
yeah. I just said, the Jags are the only team. I'll correct myself. Like, Houston's looking at this saying, we got a real shot at winning the division. You go out and you beat the Jags, you're going to have the tiebreaker. Like, that's substantial moving forward. And by the way, Houston has coming up the Broncos, who I think they're better than right now. Then they have the Jets, the Titans, the Browns, the Titans, the Colts. Like, Houston could go on a damn run here.
Coming into this week, the Houston Texans had the easiest schedule remaining in the AFC. And that's what I was talking about when I'm talking about the Stroud MVP stuff that I've been touting a lot because I think it would be fun and awesome and I'd cash 100 to 1 ticket. They got to make the playoffs. But their schedule's set up for them so easily that, I mean, when you talk about are the Browns going to make the playoffs, one of the teams nipping at their heels is going to be the Texans. Like, the Texans' schedule is set up so well that I think they're going to make the playoffs because Stroud's not going anywhere. I know he threw 3 picks today. I don't think that's some sign of things to come. I just think, all right, he threw 3 picks. He's going to be fine next week. He just has that demeanor about him.
I mean, my God, though, if they beat the Jags, it's not make the playoffs. It's will they win their division? Because right now they are 1 game back of the Jags. If they beat the Jags, they'd have the season sweep tiebreaker and the easiest schedule in the NFL. I mean, D'Amico's about to...
Real quick, I was going to say, you brought him up, but who's your coach of the year right now?
D'Amico. Not even close.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not even...
If the Vikings had won tonight, I think my Kevin O'Connell argument would be a lot stronger. They lost, but whatever. I still would vote for Kevin O'Connell. I think he's done a great job through the adversity and all that. But when people bring up D'Amico, I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, this team was supposed to be absolute trash this year. And I know they got this rocket ship at quarterback, and that's great. They kind of, I don't say they lucked into it, but the Panthers could have taken them, right? Like, they could be Bryce Young right now and be 1-9. So, I mean, that helps, obviously, but D'Amico's done a great job. I love that hire. I was buying so much stock in D'Amico, and he's come through. And if somebody voted him coach of the year, I'd have no problem with it.
All right, so then the last game to get through before we preview a little Monday Night Football, the Seahawks lose a heartbreaker to the Rams 17-16. Sean McVay 10-5 against Pete Carroll. How in the hell? That's what, like, all I have to say about this game is I watched it and I was like, yep, Seahawks got it. Seahawks got it. Seahawks got it. Nope, they don't got it. Like, great drive by the Rams at the end. Great drive, great go-ahead by the Rams. And then the Seahawks had the chance to win this thing. They missed the field goal at the end. Stunned. I was stunned to see the Rams win this game.
Yeah, I mean, Geno got knocked out for a big stretch of this game. Drew Lock came in, and they just did nothing with him. I mean, now the Seahawks had to play Thursday night against the 49ers, not knowing if Geno's going to answer the bell. I know he's going to try. He's a tough dude. But, I mean, with him coming back, almost leading that game-winning drive, I thought was really, really impressive. It would have been a heck of a story. I thought the Seahawks screwed this up. They complete a pass to DK Metcalf with roughly 24 seconds left, right? They come up, rush up to the line. They don't spike it. They hand it to Zach Charbonnet. He gets like 2 yards. Now, basically, you got to spike it. You got to bring the field goal team on. You practically settled for a 55-yard field goal. I get Jason Myers is a really, really good kicker, having a great year, but you can't settle for 55-yard field goals. Like that was just, I thought, a horrible sequence for Seattle right there. Myers misses a kick. You lose the game, and now you can't afford to lose those games because you're chasing the 49ers, who aren't going to lose many more. I thought it was just a tough luck loss for the Seahawks, but yet they could have helped themselves at the end.
Geno injured, as you mentioned. Kenneth Walker III also suffered an oblique injury. No update on whether or not he'll be available on Thursday. So things could go off the rails quickly for the Seahawks. In the meantime, maybe the best game of the year so far. Finally, we get the game everybody's been looking forward to on Monday night, a Super Bowl rematch, Eagles at Chiefs. And I just think it's funny. These are two teams, Frank, that, let's be real, everybody keeps talking about them like they're broken. Oh, the Eagles don't look as good, and Jalen's hurt. And then you're over here with the Chiefs. It's like that offense doesn't look 8-1 versus 7-2. All right, let's just call it what it is. The two best teams in the NFL are playing on Monday night.
Yeah, they've mastered the skill of winning games, which nobody else has. I mean, there's something to be said about, hey, we're maybe not as good as we were last year, but we're 8-1. We're 7-2. Okay, well, nobody else is. I give hats off to that. But I am one of those guys who's like, what's up with the Chiefs? What's up with the Eagles? And maybe it's just because the bar was too high from last year. They're having a tough time living up to that. I mean, I think you'd agree, both teams are better last year. I don't think this is a vintage Chiefs team by any means. I think the Eagles are good, but I don't think they're great like last year.
But think about this. The Chiefs have two losses. One, they were missing two of their most important players, and the other, their starting quarterback had the flu. Like, those are the only two losses for the. I'm with you. Like, they need to figure out how to get their wide receivers to actually hold on to the football. I'm disappointed so far this year in Isaiah Pacheco and his ability to run the football consistently. And I don't think you're going to get either of those right against Philadelphia. Like, Philadelphia, you're basically going right at one of their strengths if you think you're going to get the running game right. So, I think it will be interesting to see what the game plan looks like for Kansas City to generate points. I just think, the death of both of these teams has been a little overreported.
Yeah, no, that's very fair, very fair. Who you got tomorrow night? Who you got? This is such a fun matchup. Who you got?
I think I got Philly, and I got Philly because right now, when you talk about the weapons that Philadelphia has, they're just better. I mean, across the board, Philly has better weapons, and A.J. Brown has become so unstoppable at this point. You just look at, not to mention Devontae, like, they've got a couple of guys that can absolutely crush you on the outside. This is going to be a real challenge. I think the important thing here, as you've mentioned several times, Kansas City's defense is better than we're talking about. Let's see what Kansas City's defense looks like against one of the more threatening offenses they'll face all year.
Yeah, I agree with that. The one thing I agree with that. I think the Eagles win. I do. It's always hard to pick against Mahomes and Andy Reid and Arrowhead. I get that. But I really like the depth of this Eagles team. I think the one thing to watch, though, Dallas Goedert isn't the guy who puts up crazy stats from the tight end position, but he's so integral to what they do. He's just another weapon out there. He's a guy Jalen Hurts trusts. He's going to be out for this game and probably a couple more. Hopefully not. Hopefully he comes back sooner. But I'm interested to see how the Eagles' offense adjusts to not having Dallas Goedert, and if that ends up biting them. I mean, it takes away one of their key guys. I think maybe the Chiefs exploit that. But I think, the Chiefs trying to, quote-unquote, get right on offense. They're not bad on offense by any means. But this Eagles team could get after you, man. The pass rush is good. They're good on all three levels. I just think this is going to be a hard day for the Chiefs to move the ball, whereas I think the Eagles are going to put up enough points to pull off the upset.
I do think it's a little interesting that we're talking about this matchup between these two teams, and it really feels like a defensive battle. Like, it feels like both teams are going to be judged by their defenses, which is so different than where we were a year ago, right? A year ago, it was unstoppably different offenses, right? And it just feels like this year, these two teams will win like whichever defense can actually hold the other in check wins this. I know that's not a hot take, but I do agree with you. I think it's easier to hold the Chiefs in check.
Real quick, can we talk about what happened after we stopped taping last Sunday night? Like, we were running long because me and you like talking, right? Like, we're talking. Finally, we get done, and you're like, we didn't even preview the Monday night game. And I'm like, that bums me out because I was going to say, I think the Broncos win this. You can vouch for me, Fitz. Vouch for me.
I will vouch for you. You said that. Like, you 100% correct. And in fact, the group text was blowing up with the should have taped that. Should have taped it and put it out.
Should have taped it. Now we did. Now watch. The Chiefs are going to win by 24 tomorrow, and my Eagles pick will be nothing.
The next time you have a super top secret pick that's going to be right, can you make it about the Raiders winning? That's all I ask. I mean, that would be a nice change for me. Charles McDonald's back on Tuesday with the exempt list. You do not want to miss that. I'll be back Wednesday with Charles Robinson and Jory Epstein for inside coverage. You can leave us a voicemail. It's really fun. Speakpipe.com. Speak pipe, like speak into a pipe. Speakpipe.com/0blitz. I don't know why I made that so complicated. Plus, follow us on social media. Frank is at Yahoo Schwab. I'm at Jason Fitzstone doing God's work. Our producer behind the glass is at SJ Rochelle. That's how you get to him. And be sure you leave us that 5-star review, rate, subscribe, tell your friends, your family, and enemies. Let us know what you think of the show, unless you don't like it, in which case, up yours. No, seriously. Tell everybody that you love and everybody you hate to listen to us. We will be back next Sunday. Thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Have a great week.